Hello, welcome to the EFL Fantasy Football League show, the show we enjoy making more than you enjoy watching. But this week, I'm not going to enjoy making it either because I have had my ass taken from me, sliced up, garnished with a pepper sauce, and served back to me on a silver mother-funking platter. This guy, no, he's that side. He's got a smug look on his face. He's Chris Lamming, and this week he's the victorious one.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I am. Oh, it's good to be back to winning ways after, of course, an embarrassing couple of weeks where I either didn't select a team or only scored almost 0 points. So due to games being called off, etc. So this is a first for me. It felt like the first proper week for a while where there was something on the line, and it went all right. It went all right.
So, as usual, what we're going to do is go through the teams from last week. And the truth is, I have had an absolute bloody nightmare of a week. But there were one or two bright points in my side. Shall we get straight into it?
Let's do it.
Let's do that. That looks bad, doesn't it? With the EFL Fantasy show at the bottom. Well, that's the way it is now. So there we go. So this was my team, 83 points, which is a poor haul from a double game week. Massively let down by the 3 championship players that I picked. I just cannot get on Finn Azaz at the right week. I don't get on him. He gets 2 assists and a goal. I get on him and he gets 5 points. Miserable. Josh Brownhill did get me an assist yesterday. 10 points would probably have been more or less acceptable from everybody. I was on Bayo at Watford, 4 points, absolutely awful. And look across the back line there. I've got Amerson on 10, O'Connor on 18, and Mitchell, who scored 4, was the one that I captained. Had I obviously captained Amerson, I would have had extra points. If I'd captained O'Connor, I would have had 14 more points. It would have at least taken me to 97. Shoulda, woulda, bloody coulda. Sam Tickle didn't have a great week. And once again, ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, whatever gender you choose, whatever you feel you identify as, I have been the kiss of death on EFL Fantasy because 1 week ago, I was absolutely behind Ian Evatt at Bolton Wanderers. They had Cambridge at home. I felt they had Charlton at home. 2 games I felt that Bolton were going to win. I thought they were going to be home and dry. I thought I was going to be looking at an 18-point haul there. Bear in mind, that would have put me on 96. Woulda, shoulda, coulda. Last minute goal saved them against Cambridge, beaten against Charlton. Ian Evatt sacked. So, Bolton fans, you have me to thank for removing him from your life. Any comments on that, Mr. Lamming?
Yeah, well, obviously on Bolton, it's been such a surprising team this season. I think it's often common to see a team who lost in the playoffs to have a little bit of a hangover and a slow start to the season. But I fully expected them to find their form again this season and be a really solid, guaranteed playoff side again and possibly push for automatic promotion. But it's been a bit of a toxic atmosphere in whatever the name of the stadium is these days. I will still refer to it as the Reebok.
Tough sheet.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one at the Tough Sheet Stadium. And it's almost felt a little bit a matter of time until Ian Evatt lost his job. It's almost like they were waiting for a poor performance, poor result, so they could finally justify pulling the trigger. So it did surprise me that you chose to back them, not because of the Cambridge game, but because of the Charlton game, because I think Charlton are quietly all right at the moment. And yeah, obviously you're unfortunate that it went that way. And again, Finn Azaz has actually been quiet a little bit recently, just generally speaking. He certainly hasn't been as consistent as he has in terms of scoring big points. I think you're seeing that a little bit across the leagues with some of the higher scoring attacking based players. Some of them are starting to slow down a little bit in their consistency. And I think part of that is the fact that the points are a representation of their overall performance, and players that perform well on fantasy EFL are probably performing pretty well in real life. And what that means is their opposition are going to identify them as a threat and maybe set up specifically to counter that. I think we're seeing that with Finn Azaz a little bit at Middlesbrough, who themselves are being a little bit less consistent recently. But I think you're unlucky with that, certainly. And obviously Alex Mitchell not even completing the match in the second game. scoring very few points. Of course, I selected him as well. Just fortunately didn't select him as my captain. But that's just unlucky because he's been performing incredibly consistently for quite some time now. So I think that's just a really unfortunate one. And then Bayo, without wanting to blow my own trumpet, I did have my doubts around that selection when we recorded last week. So
I don't remember you saying it.
Don't like to say very often I told you so, but I will say I told you so on that one.
I'm going to watch back. I don't reckon you said that. I reckon that is perceived hindsight that you're going for there.
Or maybe it was in my own mind in that I didn't pick him myself for various reasons. I could have sworn I mentioned it last week, though.
Well, you say that, but I'm not 100% sure that you did, to be honest. And there we go. And also the name of the Bolton Stadium, it's easy to remember because it's what you probably said to me when Bolton got beat against Charlton. Tough sheet. Tough sheet. So here's the winning team. I've got to be honest, 121 points. Even if I'd selected Anthony O'Connor and even if I'd selected a team that had gone on and scored 18 points, I still wouldn't have got anywhere near your total. And to have had at least 3 players that were actually shit in your team, 4 players that were shit in your team, that's a massive, massive fall. In fact, the maths can't be right there. Let me just add that up. I reckon there's an error. Take us through the team while I do the maths. I've got the calculator. I'll just make sure that it's right. Just hold on. Go on. You talk while I do this.
I shall. Well, first, the team selections at the bottom helped. Both you and I selected Leeds United and were justified in doing so, picking up 18 points. I decided to back Burnley, who picked up 16 points. So that was really fortunate. Captaining Anthony O'Connor of Harrogate Town was a reasonable shout in terms of my selections. I think it's quite common these days for most of us to captain defenders. And it's just picking which defender do you want to captain that week. In terms of my selections, that was a good shout because the other 2 really underperformed. So a total of 36 points for Anthony O'Connor really helped out. Gus Hamer, I'm quite pleased with that shout. Had not been selected by a huge number of people, despite being a bit of a fixture in Sheffield United's team and everything they do kind of well attacking, he seems to be involved in. Does also tend to score a point here and there for interceptions as well. So that went well, along with Denore picking up 20 points, who has been a bit of an interception machine in the Championship. But we've already mentioned Alex Mitchell. Curtis Nelson is a bit of a wild card, really backfired, didn't even play in the second game. And then Joel Pirro, who was probably a little bit of a risk, albeit did play regular football in these 2 matches, didn't really contribute anything significant in terms of assists, goals, shots on targets, key passes, etc. So, yeah, a couple of...
I don't like to say I told you so, but I did actually say that. I didn't think Joel Pirro.
You did. I remember you saying it. You did say that last week. I will credit you that one. But Curtis Nelson was a terrible pick, and I got away with that.
Yeah, what breaks my heart as well is I actually got on Gus Hamer first, if you remember. I had Gus Hamer 2 weeks in a row and he scored really well for me. When your team landed last week, I remember looking at it and thinking, I wish I'd gone for Hamer. But again, woulda, shoulda, coulda. Look, it's a good week, 121 points. I can take the mick all I want, but a 60-odd point week, 60-point game session, so 2 lots of 60, decent. And as you say, Sam Tickle 5 points. To be honest, it's really that midfield and Burnley that have won it for you, isn't it? Captain in O'Connor, the 2 midfield players vastly outperforming. I mean, bear in mind, one of mine got 10, but even so, yeah. So a good week, well done, all of that sort of stuff. No moral victory for me, nothing like that. Literally just a victory for you.
Yeah. So, and that's nice, isn't it? That's nice.
Here we go again. Wow,
for everyone watching, I'm sure.
I thought we'd moved on from this. I mean,
well, honestly, you left a pause. I was waiting for you to move on to the next section. You left a little bit of a pause, which is normally an indication for go on, say something. So I said something and just give myself a pat on the back.
And as we know, if anybody leaves a little gap, as we know from your pina colada night, you're always trying to get into it, aren't you, with certain barmen? Anyway, moving on. Who should people have picked this week, Mr. Lamming?
Yeah. So there was not really a single player here that had a real standout week that only played once. So there were a good few players who played twice. There were a handful in League One and League Two in terms of teams, but the whole of the Championship were playing twice. So I've just gone for the highest scorers overall. All the players in this list did play 2 matches. So firstly, James Trafford, 0-0 versus Sunderland. But of course, in that match, made 2 penalty saves, scoring 14 points. And then a clean sheet in the 5-0 victory over Plymouth. That was 21 points for James Trafford at Burnley. Mark Williams of Luton Town with 26 points, scoring 11 in the 0-0 draw against Preston with 11 clearances and 15 in the 3-2 loss versus Oxford United. 12 clearances in that game, but also with a goal and an assist in that one. So lost 5 points for missing out on a clean sheet, but certainly added those points and some back again with his influence at the other end of the pitch. Midfielder Harrison Burrows is officially classed as a midfielder on this game of Sheffield United. Scored both goals in a 2-0 victory over Norwich and also scored a goal with 2 key passes in the 2-1 victory versus Swansea City, scoring 24 points. And our one and only non-championship player this week was Rumaan Burrell of Burton Albion. Burton having a strong week, scoring their only goal in a 1-1 draw versus Crawley and a goal and an assist in the win versus Wigan Athletic. A rare victory for Burton Albion. Rumaan Burrell with 3 goal involvements over 2 matches, 18 points for him.
Very good. He was a striker, is he? I assume that was where we moved.
He is indeed.
Strikers. So let's have a look at the top of the table. So this is the overall table. Josh is still out leading the race, but Mr. Meacham is up in terms of Lincoln City fans, assuming that he is a Lincoln City fan. I believe Captain Jaden Bogle, 38 points. Look at that. 153 points. What a week that is.
Outstanding. And then a Latelath, high points again for Emmanuel Latelath, who is, we mentioned this in previous weeks, had gone from a guaranteed pick to maybe not so, because him and Mr. Conway were almost sharing game time. So it was almost pick your poison, really. And as we both found out, I think at various times, is we picked the wrong one. So we've stopped guaranteeing it. But a good shout to pick Latelath there with 16 points. That's a big one.
I pick the wrong one all the time. You're now 29th. You have gone ahead by 30 points on the back of that week, and I'd gone ahead of you. So that's pretty upsetting. I mean, there's an 83 for me, which is the weakest score bar the fact she gave me a largie from, I think, Jason Reeves. Surrey Imps there, fewer than me. Not a great week for Cornell. What I've got to say, though, big shout out to Matt Fenton, 158 points. But again, Captain O'Connor, do you know what I mean? It's just, if you get that captain right, it can make a big difference. I mean, to be fair, that's a great week. 160 points for Mr. Burgess. O'Connor captain again, but look at that. O'Connor and Sims. Everyone got on O'Connor, but Harrogate, doubling up is a good thing. And he's got Azaz and Pirro. Imagine that. Great week. And just because I know that we said you had a good week, but I do want to bring you down to earth. So this is the weekly league table, and you do have to go all the way down to 18 to get you. But to be fair, you have to go down to 39 to get me. So I was actually more or less on average with my position in the overall league table. There you go. I think these are the teams that probably just don't get picked all the time. So that is that. We're 13 minutes in. Do you want to go first on the team, or do you want me to go through my team first? Because this week there are a lot of differences, aren't there?
There are indeed. Yeah, I'll go first if that's okay. Probably the toughest week I've had in picking my team in regard to had so much choice. Sometimes it's tough because you don't know who to pick because there's not a lot to choose from. I was overwhelmed with options this time round. So only Portsmouth and Millwall in the Championship are playing twice, I believe. However, it is a 2-game week for the whole of League One and League Two this week. And there were some really interesting matchups. So I whittled it down. So I messaged you before we recorded this, and I had to whittle 19 players down to 7. It actually ended up being 21 players down to 7 because one of the players that I had originally written down, I realised wasn't available. And also, I thought of another player who wasn't even on my list that ended up actually in my team. So yeah, 21 players overall that I had to try and whittle down. So I thought, well, if you've got that much choice, let's try and be as sensible as possible to spread the load here. So I have avoided doubling up on anyone. So I've got, of course, 7 players plus 2 teams, and they are all unique in regard to teams that they play for. So in goal, Mr. Keeley of Leyton Orient, an in-form Leyton Orient playing at home to Reading and away to Exeter City. Partly picked because he's a good goalkeeper. Leyton Orient don't tend to concede a huge number of high-quality chances, but also I wanted goalkeepers that play for other teams that I was tempted by. So Wickham was one. I was tempted by Crewe's goalkeeper as well, to name a couple. I wanted to kind of keep those teams available for potential other picks. So I've gone for Keeley in goal from Exeter City. Almost standard pick, really, when he's playing the same number of games as everyone else. Is Mickey Dimitriou, who I've captained. Almost seems silly not to do that, really, when he's the highest scoring player in the whole game and is still consistently picking up a decent number of points. I have then gone for Mr. Jones of Charlton Athletic. Now, Charlton on decent form have got back-to-back home games against Shrewsbury Town and Bristol Rovers. Shrewsbury Town, of course, resurgent, really, under Gareth Ainsworth. So I don't think this is a guaranteed 3 points and a guaranteed clean sheet, though on paper you'd expect it to have a good chance of that. But it's going to be clearance king here, really, I think, for Jones, because Shrewsbury are, of course, a very, very direct team, put balls into the box a lot, and Jones performs really well with headed clearances, particularly with Alex Mitchell maybe not available after not completing the last game. So normally I'd have gone for Mitchell here because he has been really consistent recently, scores really highly for clearances, etc. But yeah, just not finishing that last match has made me doubt that. So I've gone for Jones instead. And then Luke Garbett, one of many, many options here, I have to say, in defence. I just like Salford from a defensive perspective. They really don't concede many chances at all. So from a clean sheet perspective, there's a good opportunity here, I think, against Cheltenham and Newport. But also, I think there's a good opportunity here for potential assists here, specifically against Newport County, who are one of the worst teams in the league in terms of giving up high-quality chances. So, yeah, I picked him as maybe a slight wild card, though he is a high-scoring player. So I don't think it's a hot take to include Garbett, but I do feel there was maybe plenty of other options to pick at the back. I almost went against a back three as well, because I had a lot of midfielders as options as well, and also a lot of centre forwards. I almost went for a 2-3-1. I messed around with a 2-2-2, but thought I'd revert back to type and stick with the trusty 3-2-1. In midfield, Denore, the only championship player I have selected of Millwall, scored really well over the last 2 games. Interception king. 2 away games for Millwall means they're likely to be sitting back a little bit more than they would at home. And you would hope that he will get in between man and ball a few times. I'm not expecting anything other than points for assists from Denore. And the same goes for Ethan Erahon, who of course, Lincoln City. It'd be awful not to include a Lincoln player off the back of a win, wouldn't it? So Ethan, again, interception king in League One. But also Lincoln are playing at home to Peterborough United, who are a heavily possession-based side, which means there's going to be a lot of opportunities for interceptions for Ethan here. And then against Blackpool, again, slightly more direct under Steve Bruce than they were historically. But again, I think at home, Lincoln will like to have a decent amount of the ball against Blackpool, but he performs well for those. But I just thought there's a real opportunity here for Ethan to get some really big points against Peterborough United. So picked Ethan. Some other honourable mentions in midfield, because there was quite a few to pick from. I was tempted by Ben Woods of of Accrington, who I've picked a few times before, who scored well. Connor Coventry of Charlton, but of course decided to go for Lloyd Jones at the back. Joe Powell of Rotherham. I feel their fixtures are favourable for key passes, chances created, assists, but decided, as you can see, to go for Rotherham at the bottom, primarily because they have got 2 very winnable fixtures with teams who are quite weak in regards to Rotherham's strengths. So I felt that Rotherham would be a decent selection there. Notts County at the bottom, 2 winnable home fixtures. Little bit concerned of Bromley because Bromley are a strong side, but I've lost the last 2. So I'm thinking maybe tide is turning a little bit on Bromley, not so good. That leaves me with my centre forward pick, which I've gone for Kyle Wootton. Again, fixtures I think quite favourable here. So away at Crawley, Kyle Wootton's strengths really play against Crawley's weaknesses. Crawley do tend to concede a high number of chances, albeit not quite as many under Rob Elliott as they did previously. And then Shrewsbury Town at home, I just think there's a talent gap between Stockport and Shrewsbury. I expect a tough game, but again, Kyle Wootton's strengths match up against Shrewsbury's strengths at the back in terms of that directness and robustness. So it's not going to be an easy ride for him. To be honest, I picked him because I feel like he's a really good chance of scoring at least 1 goal in one of these 2 games. He might even, if things click for Stockport, might get multiple goals against Crawley Town. Some other honourable mentions for forwards was Jatta of Notts County, but I went for Notts County as a team at the bottom. Leeburn of Charlton. I do kind of fancy Charlton this week, but decided to go for the defender because of the fixtures. And also maybe a couple of out there picks when I was flirting with playing 2 up top was did a Markanday newly on loan at Leyton Orient. Mentioned quite like Leyton Orient at the moment. Decided to go for their goalkeeper in the end, but I think he's a really smart pickup. Had a strong season so far on loan at I think Chesterfield, and has now joined Leyton Orient. And I think he was a class above in League 2. So interesting, but I thought there's other players ahead of him. And then a real out there one who, if things go well, I think could turn out to be a really strong pick this season for the second half of the season, which is James Collins, who has just signed for Lincoln City. Lincoln have been crying out for some experience up top and some robustness. But I was so tempted. I thought James Collins versus Peterborough United. I just really fancied that. But of course, he hasn't played yet. It would be his debut. We don't know if he's going to start. I just couldn't risk it. But I thought in terms of just stylistically, it fit really nicely. But of course, went risk averse and decided against it.
It's interesting stuff. Yeah, interesting stuff. Bear in mind that I didn't pick my team until about 40 minutes ago. So there's very, very little thought gone into mine. Certainly not the same level of thought that you've put into yours. I am interested by the Kyle Wootton pick. And I think another striker, I haven't picked him, who is worth looking at is Joe Taylor. Huddersfield at home to Bolton. They're at home to Birmingham. Birmingham will be attacking Huddersfield, which means there may be spaces in behind. They might play a little bit higher. So I did toy with him. I really like the pick of Ethan Arahan, and I now wish I had picked Ethan Arahan, but I have, and people will see, tripled up on one team this week. So that would have been a double up on another, which would have been a really risky bit of business. I also like the Leyton Orient pick. I think they've gone under the radar, and on the Real EFL podcast that I do, it's available on YouTube. Real EFL is the channel. I talked about how Orient and Reading in particular have both kind of surprised everybody by the way that they've crept into the top. They're 7 and 8, I think. Richie Wellens does a phenomenal job. For me, Richie Wellens and Ian Evatt were 2 managers who have been under pressure at certain points this season. Wellens has turned it around. Evatt didn't. They're 2 managers that if Michael Scavala were ever to leave Lincoln, I would have no problem with them being in charge. They are abrasive as sandpaper, but like Danny Cowley, you can be loved by your own fans and hated by everybody else. And I think Richie Wellens is one of those managers. So it's interesting that you haven't doubled up on anybody because, as people will see, I have gone in hard and fast. Pardon the slight sexual undertones there on Notts County. Now, I do not like Notts County. They're a Lincoln City rival. Every time we go there, we seem to get thrashed. It really annoys me. But I'm going to explain why. I really like both of these games. Notts County are on an absolute roll at the moment. I think they look like a team that could well be in League One next season. Alex Bass almost certain to play. Like him, like the potential there for at least 1 clean sheet, if not 2. My thought process here is I want 10 points from each of my outfield players as a minimum, and then I want somebody to stand out. I think Dimitriou can stand out. So am I going to get 10 points from Alex Bass across 2 games? I think I can get that. So I've gone for him. Jatta. Now, he's been the subject of a bid this week from, I want to say Portsmouth or Plymouth, somebody like that, 750,000. Notts County have turned it down. There's absolutely no guarantee whatsoever that he's going to play. I think McGoldrick will. I think McGoldrick is going to score. Every time I backed a Notts County player this season, they have failed. I've had no success. I backed Jody Jones. He got injured. I backed Dan Crowley after he'd scored brilliantly. He didn't score. I backed Jatta and McGoldrick at the times. Neither of them have scored. So I am literally just going, right, well, let's just have everybody from Notts County, because if they do fail as a Lincoln City fan, I've done my job. So I have backed those 2, and I've gone triple threat by going for them on the bottom right as well. Like you say, Bromley have lost actually 3 in a row, although one of those was against Newcastle United in the FA Cup. But I do feel that a big cup tie and going out of a big cup tie can sometimes derail a season a little bit. And Carlisle are just crap anyway, aren't they? They really are. Well, they are. Like Saturday, they dropped Luke Armstrong because they want to try and get rid of him, and now they're going to recall him. I mean, what does that do for morale? You're not good enough to play on Saturday, but now we might need you against Notts County. Nah, not for me. So I'm heavily on Notts County. It wouldn't be the first time they've disappointed me, and I'm hoping that this isn't another time. I've gone for Aaron O'Connor. Harrogate, I just think perhaps the teams don't particularly suit his style, but we are talking there's blocks and interceptions as well as clearances for a centre-half. I think Harrogate are going to be under it in both of those games. I don't expect a clean sheet from him in either of those, but I do expect him to be heavily involved otherwise. And also he scored well last week, so, I'm always late to the party. Mickey Dimitriou, no-brainer, captain. Accrington, Wimbledon, both good games for him. Like you say, best player on the game. So why would you not pick him? It'd be utterly brainless. And then I've gone for Pawdy. I needed to get on Lincoln this week as well. Ethan Arahan, in terms of interceptions, would obviously have been a one choice. But again, it is block. I think, what is it? Is it blocks, interceptions, and clearances for a centre-half?
No interceptions for centre-halves. Blocks and clearances and tackles.
Tackles, that's it. So interceptions, tackles, whatever, getting your foot on the ball when you need to. He's going to play. He'll play 90 minutes in both as long as he don't get injured. And now I've picked him, he could. And I think Peterborough at Blackpool, like you say, have gone a little bit more direct as well. So I just, basically I had 5 minutes to pick my team. Pawdy O'Connor is the go-to man. Now, I've picked Evans for a similar reason. I think that you've probably picked Arahan. Evans is always involved in the midfield at Blackpool. In fact, I haven't even checked if he's injured or not, which would be typical for me. He scored well before. I've had him in my side before and dropped him out of my side before. So I think that he could be somebody. He did play 90 minutes in his last game as well, just double checked. So I think he's somebody that could score points. He has scored points well before. I don't normally back against Lincoln, or if I do, I then don't back Lincoln at the same time. But I think the type of game that we'll have against Blackpool, O'Connor and Evans will both see plenty of the ball. And if they're both involved, it doesn't matter whether they win or lose. I mean, it does, because Lincoln are going to win. But you know what I mean? It doesn't matter as long as they rack up those points. Then I have gone for one of your honourable mention players. Now, people who know me know that I despise Rotherham. I despise Steve Evans. I don't like the way they go about the business. But people who know me and have known me for the last, let's say, 5 years now, will know I'm a big Joe Powell fan. I was a Joe Powell fan when he first signed for Burton. I thought he was a great signing, former West Ham player. There was talk that he was going to come to us at the same time as Anthony Scully, and instead he went to Burton. I've liked him ever since. I think Rotherham was a good pick for your teams because they've got that winnable away game. And then obviously Cambridge, a winnable home game. They're on a little bit more of a roll since Steve Evans said that they totally dominated against us on New Year's Day. Clearly the fact holding up his eyes meant that he got bad vision because they didn't dominate at all. It was just a bad game of football. But I like Joe Powell, and I think that he could be instrumental in at least one, if not two, Rotherham wins. So he's a bit, but I thought he was a wild card pick, and then you go and mention him as one of your outside picks. And then Walsall, do you know what? I'm just thinking it's a no-brainer. There's a 15-point gap between them and fourth. They just keep winning games. I think I did the EFL podcast with Kyle, and they said something like they haven't lost, apart from losing, ironically, at home to Fleetwood 5-2. They've only lost something like once in September in the league. I think they're just flying. And I think that it's a risky pick because it's 2 away games. Bradford's a big game as well. Bradford are on the cusp of the playoffs, but it's risk versus reward. I think I've played safe with Notts County with 2 home wins. So let's go Walsall with 2 away wins. I will almost guarantee that Walsall will win 1 of those games, if not both of them. And if they win 1, a good away win can pick up the points. And again, I've got to try and do something a little bit out there, I think, haven't I? Seeing as I lost 30 odd points. By the way, Sid, the last time that Walsall failed to win back-to-back league games was the 1st and 5th of October, or failed to win a game. Sorry, so failed to win in back-to-back games. I didn't put that correctly, which was against Fleetwood and Chesterfield. Other than that, they've literally been winning games all the way through. I mean, in the league, they have won their last 7, 8, 9, I think, on the spin. I just really fancy them to pick me up some points, and I'm hoping that they could be the differential between me and you this week. But there's plenty of other areas that we differ. So that's my team. Any initial thoughts?
A few. I really like Walsall, by the way, as a football team. I've been super, super impressed with them. I think that's hardly a hot take, is it? Because I'm sure everyone has, but I just particularly like how, away from the fantasy EFL, just generally how efficient they are. They have the lowest or second lowest possession in League 2, but are arguably the most attacking team in regard to chances created, touches in the box. And it's not just that they had Nathan Lowe, because they've been finishing off their chances. They haven't missed they've missed a decent number of those big chances created. They're just good. They're just so good. But probability, they've won 9 on the spin. Like that just can't carry it. Surely at that rate, it can't, can it? So I get your point. Like you back the trends, don't you? But like for me, it was just the fixtures were.
Yeah, but if they win and draw,
Oh, I'm not criticizing the pick. I'm just saying that it can't, can it? Surely they can't keep winning all the time. And I just think also another point on Pordy, O'Connor, and Lee Evans. Now, firstly, there are other fixtures, of course, rather than Lincoln versus Blackpool. I think Lee Evans has got a big opportunity against Exeter City to create quite a few chances, and will probably pick up some good points there, because his key attribute is his key passes. He's got the most key passes in League One with 72 so far this season on here, and of course there are points to be won for key passes for midfielders. But I think that plays into Pordy O'Connor's hands. To be honest, I think that would potentially lead to Pordy potentially getting some big points against Blackpool, because who's going to be heading those crosses and getting in the way of those passes? It's probably Pordy O'Connor. It can't be a key pass. If a defender gets in the way of it, it's just a pass. So therefore, it wouldn't go for Lee Evans, but it will go in favour of Pordy. But my mind was, well, they're going to take points off each other, aren't they then? And then I think for Pordy against Peterborough don't tend to put too many crosses into the box and don't tend to go too long. So I, of course, would always almost automatically go for Pordy, but I actually chose against it this week for that reason. And I chose against Lee Evans because he's playing against Lincoln, who have got Pordy O'Connor. So I think there might be a little conflict there. But, of course, it only takes Pordy to get a million heady clearances against Blackpool, and it takes Lee Evans to get a couple of assists or a goal against Exeter, and you have fully justified those picks. But everything else makes sense.
And to be fair, I only had 5 minutes, so
get those excuses in early, eh?
Whatever. Right. With 3 minutes over, I know that my dinner needs cooking, so we will wrap up. So, yes, it was a win for Chris. It was a deserved win for Chris as well. He absolutely thrashed me this week, so fair play, sir. It is now 12-10 after game week 24. We're looking ahead to game week 25, and it's probably the one game week where we have had the most differences. Now, if I win this week, I think that we should do draft picks next week. So I think that for the show, we will have 2 for each. We'll have our screens ready, and we will pick as we record, as long as we've got our 2 picks for each. And I think that will be interesting. But if Chris wins, obviously he's on the 1% rule. I'm not doing a draft with a 1%er. So sounded like a placenta. So there we go, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls. That was game week 24 of the EFL Fantasy League show. We will be back next week, and hopefully I will be smiling. But in the meantime, thank you for watching, and we'll be back very, very soon. Goodbye.